Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. I am Miss Campbell. I am joined by Miss Paulson. There you go. Sorry. And we're also joined by Courtney and Yvette, and they are here to help us discuss the Boredom Brilliant module. And one of the things I want to make sure that everybody listening to this, and for you guys as well, if you have not yet reached 1.4.1, you want to make sure you get there, because the only assignment that really counts against you if it's late is the first draft of the writing artifact. So what we want to do is give you an opportunity to get there. So what you want to do is create a Google Doc that says Writing Lab, and it'll say it in the title and in the document itself. You can also use the phrase Writing Lab if it's a discussion board and you only have a text box. You want to submit this document for every assignment you're behind up to 1.4.1. And you're still responsible for these. So you do want to make a note to make sure you go back and pick them up. But after we've talked about this, sometimes it's easier to go back to the assignments because we have talked about it, and then you can submit those successfully. So just make sure that you're up to 1.4.1, and if you're listening to the recording, you might want to pause now and make sure that you can get up there. Okay. So for this module, we've actually given you 3 options. You can choose one of these 3 to respond to the information in Boredom Brilliant. The first one is called an Epideictic Speech, which is kind of a eulogy, and we'll take a look at an example of that in a little bit. Or you can write an argument essay, or you could even do an infographic, and you just choose one of the 3 to do. And I know what some of you are thinking right now. You're thinking, ooh, infographic, I don't have to write. And that's true, you're not writing paragraphs, but still, putting together an infographic still requires the same kind of thinking strategies to communicate your ideas through the infographic. So, did you want to say something, Ms. Paulson?
No, I just was going to say that don't underestimate the amount of time it might take you to do an infographic. It's definitely not it's not an easier option. It's just a different option.
Right. Thank you. Okay, so we want to look at these options specifically so that, and you don't have to make a decision today on what you do, just after the conversation and after digesting all this information. It's the message that you want to give. So the Epideictic Speech, in a speech to your future children or society in general, write an Epideictic speech extolling or praising the virtues of the smartphone or castigating its vices. Consider some of Aristotle's rhetorical tips for persuasive public speaking. First, consider the attitude of the audience. Now, here's what's kind of weird. If this is to your future children, think of this. What's technology going to be like when they are becoming adults? I know that I asked that of my colleagues the other day. I said, when we get ready to retire, what is technology going to look like? Because we think we're at the forefront of technology now. Imagine what it'll be like in the future. That's just kind of weird. Reckon the values and ethical virtues they think should be praised. That means you're bringing up the good things about them, and then take into account that favorably inclined, antagonistic, or even indifferent listeners, and it indicates the way that you have to convince. So if it is kind of like, we've got to slow down our use of technology, how are you going to convince teenagers who have a very hard time letting go of that device? So that's the kind of thing that you have to consider. I did give you this was an Epideictic Speech I thought was really well done.
On the joyous spring morning of April 16th, 1945, a beautiful...
Ms. Paulson, do you hear the audio on that by any chance?
I do, yes.
Perfect. Okay.
16th, 1945, a beautiful soul was born. This soul would prove to be a strong mother, daughter, grandmother, but most importantly, a fighter. As we are gathered to mourn the death of Mrs. Ernestine Ferguson, let us remember to celebrate her strength, passion, and zeal for life.
So that's kind of the positive, and it does sound more like a eulogy. So how would you apply it to this specific assignment? And Ms. Paulson, do you remember what you said earlier about your interpretation of this assignment?
Yes, I was just saying to think of it like a speech in which you either praise or talk about how bad it is. So you pick one side or the other. Don't go back and forth in between so much, because you're kind of going to be arguing a point. I'm looking through my papers. I had notes on it here. Mm-hmm. So you're going to praise or blame smartphones. And you can use your personal experiences and use your response to the readings. The other thing we talked about, Mrs. Campbell and I talked about this morning, is I don't know if any of you girls have ever watched Black Mirror, but it's a whole series about technology.
Eyes lit up.
Yeah, the possibilities, the kind of some of the dark side and some of the good things about technology in the future. But that's another way. Think of it like that. Put yourself in one of those episodes, or in the year 2050, and think about what it might be like. That show just fascinates me because I can't believe all the things that come up. But anyway, think about that, and then consider, what would you warn your children about, or what would you tell them is so great about technology versus the limited stuff we have today.
Yeah, and so this option, it does require you more to pick a side and really push that side. So that's option one. And notice too, it says that you can actually perform this. You can record yourself performing it, or just write the script. You can submit a script as well. The second option is the argument essay, and you read the Time magazine article from Markham Hyde, and he says, it seems like every generation of parents has a collective freakout when it comes to kids and new technologies, television and video games, each inspired widespread hand-wringing among grown-ups. But the inescapability of today's mobile devices, coupled with the personal allure of social media, seems to separate smartphones from older screen-based media. Parents, teens, and researchers agree smartphones are having a profound impact on the way adolescents today communicate with one another and spend their free time. And while some experts say it's too soon to ring alarm bells about smartphones, others argue we understand enough about young people's emotional and developmental vulnerabilities to recommend restricting kids' escalating phone habit. So the prompt is, explain his argument and discuss the extent to which you agree or disagree with his analysis. Support your position, providing reasons and examples from your own experience, observations, or readings. So this one here is one that you can be a little bit more on the fence with it. So if there's good and there's bad that comes with it, that could be the topic of an argument essay, because you can explain what are the positives and what are the negatives. Did you want to add anything about this one, Ms. Paulson?
Only that if you choose this option, and it goes for all argumentative essays, especially ones that are responding to a prompt that's long like this, that's a paragraph, you have to make sure that at the very beginning of your essay, in like the very first paragraph or two, that you summarize this prompt or this paragraph in your own words completely. And it's important to do that at the very beginning of the essay to kind of orient the reader, like so that the reader knows what you're talking about. And it's always important in the summary to leave your opinion out. So you'll write, summaries can be longer than the original thing they're summarizing. They can also be a little bit shorter. It just depends on how you go about restating all of these ideas. But it's important that you have no opinion in it. You save that for your thesis statement and the rest of your essay. And it's important that you do that right away in the very beginning of your essay, so the reader doesn't, so the reader understands the topic that you're responding to.
And what I was looking at earlier is that this particular passage, I don't see the argument yet. I see both sides, and he doesn't really pick his side. And I believe in the article, that's kind of the way he presents it, is that it's information that people need to know. And so it becomes, I think, maybe you can extend that to an argument. For example, where it says some experts say it's too soon to ring alarm bells about smartphones, but others argue we understand enough about young people's emotions and developmental vulnerabilities. So that seems to be where the two sides of the argument are, and you can then go through just summarizing the information he's presented and then come out with your claim that says we do need to heed those alarm bells, or restricting some of the phone habits may benefit students, but there's more benefits to having that smartphone. So just something else that you want to consider. Okay, the third option, I don't know why there's a blank screen there.
I did that by accident earlier, sorry. Okay. I added it. I didn't mean to do that, but
okay. I gave you editing privileges. You can do that if you want to. Okay, so now we're at the infographics. It says, using data from your survey, Bored and Brilliant Challenge, and other personal notes and experiences relating to the readings, create an infographic on the topic of Bored and Brilliant, similar to the Creativity Essential Job and Skills infographic. Do you guys remember that one? Okay, so that's the one that, and I don't have, that's what the slide's for, isn't it? I think that's what the slide is.
To add that infographic. Yes.
Okay.
Probably because we were talking about that.
Right, yes. Right. If you do have that on your computer, if you can bring that one up, I forgot what number that's actually in. But if you bring that up, you'll notice that it has the full sentence at the top that is kind of its thesis. And then it has the circle and the different pieces. I would almost say that it's, for me, it's not quite enough. It's not telling me, yes, I know about what are the 21st century skills. I might have expected a little bit more than just the tiny little symbol or something. For that purpose, it was fine. But I think I would like to see a little bit more, because if you're going to, it says to illustrate the significant statistics from your experiences reading surveys and Bored and Brilliant Challenge, infographics make complex information and difficult concepts more appealing and digestible. They also help boost engagement on presentations, social media, and marketing activities. They are not difficult to make. Now, that means you know what you're going to say. They aren't that hard to put together. What's difficult is how you're going to put it together. So you will want to make you will be spending the same amount of time on this as you would an essay. Ms. Paulson, what did you want to add to that?
Just to reiterate before that, creating the images they may be very challenging. Like I was saying earlier, that when I have to do the visual vocabulary, meaning like I have to choose an image or draw an image to represent a word, it's often the most difficult part, because I could just look up a definition or use the word in a sentence, but when I have to create the image, it's almost like a different part of your brain has to work, and you have to actually think about what kind of picture would portray what you're trying to, convey to somebody. And you can't just Google an image. Like you really have to create the idea. So doing the infographic might be more challenging than just writing stuff out, because you're going to have to be creating images that portray meaning, not to just you. People are going to have to understand your graphics. So, if you're going to do it, I think it's great. I think it's an excellent option. Just pay attention to that. It might be very time consuming a little bit, but it might be very enjoyable for you too. So,
and we've provided you a couple of resources, and we'll show them to you a little bit later, on what to remember about creating infographics. So, but in the nature of this module, I think it's a really fun option because it does have to tap into your creativity and your use of technology. So, okay, so now what we want to do is take a look at the sources. And so I'm actually going to bring up the PDF that has at least the printed ones. What has happened with some of these, the reason that some of these were not available in the printed format on the PDF is that, you know, you have to get rights to things. And so there were only a couple that actually appeared in the PDF, but we do have the links in this presentation that will take you to the actual source. So let me first bring this up because we will be looking first at Robertson's piece.
Yes, and while you're doing that, Mrs. Campbell, let me just tell the students, especially my girls, if you are able to pop into the office here or there, wherever's closer, I recommend that at the beginning of each module or as you come across the reading assignments that you actually print them out and have them maybe in a little folder, or that you transfer them to like an editable Google Doc or use Cami. But I need it helps me to have them in front of me, and it helps me to actually write on the paper because like right now, as we talk about it, I'm going to be able to hold them up and look at my thoughts as I was reading it. And it really enriches the reading experience, and it's going to help you keep your thoughts organized. So however you could keep copies and annotate them and keep them kind of together either in a Google folder or in a actual, I have a cute purple folder that I keep them in for this unit. I find that really helpful because you have a lot of information to keep track of. There's 7 different sources plus the TED Talk YouTube videos that you're watching. So that makes 9 sources altogether that you could be pulling from. And so it's a lot of information. So that's just sort of a tip for keeping things organized, and it depends on how you like to think while you're reading. But I'm old school, but I like to actually write on the paper, and you're more than welcome to print out in our offices anytime you come in. So I'd recommend doing that.
And the numbering of the paragraphs is also important. For one thing, it helps you if you are using this as a source, because these are electronic forms. We're not going to use page numbers. We'll use paragraph numbers when we're citing the information. So when you're printing off the article from the site, I would recommend that you do number the paragraphs once you get through there. So, okay.
Yes.
And I think now, since we've already mentioned that there are so many different sources as to why that is, welcome to college. This is we're getting you as close to college as we can possibly get without having you, pay for your tuition and your books and all like that. But now it's senior year, the focus of this class is to be able to take multiple sources and to put them together in a way that you're actually providing a unique perspective on them. And so you're going to be doing a lot of reading. And even more so in college, I think. Did you want to speak to that, Ms. Paulson?
Yeah, I'm just going to point out the main difference between this unit and a college unit is we're going to provide you with all the sources here, which is, you'll see, it's enough work for you to just read them, understand them, and then write about them, respond to them. But the difference will be as you evolve in college, you are going to have to go get your sources also. So reading these well and understanding how to study an article academically is going to help you identify resources when you have to go do the research yourself. That's that speaker, huh?
It was me. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
Hey, we have sound. We should be grateful.
Yeah, I know. But it's going to help you sort of learn to, just by reading something, to evaluate what is a valid source. Because there's a lot of information out there that you're not going to want to use for academic work. It's maybe not nonsense, but it's really not valid. And everything we've given you, while it's a little bit popular and it's from magazines, one of them is from a book, these are considered good sources. And so this is going to help you a lot. Studying this is going to help you in college for sure.
Right. Okay, so let's look specifically at Robertson's Embrace Boredom to Become More Creative. And the first question is, what is his major claim? So, ladies, were you able to find, like, the specific sentence where you think, hey, that's got to be the thesis, that's got to be the main idea? And by the way, did you annotate physical copies of these, or did you just look at them online?
Online.
Okay. We'll give you a couple minutes here to kind of review through them. This one is the Embrace Boredom to Become More Creative. And actually, if you go to the presentation.
I think you got the wrong one. Ours says in the pursuit of unhappiness.
Oh, dear.
What did she say?
Miss Paulson.
Yes, what did she say? She hasn't read them.
No. You sent the link to the wrong presentation. You sent Pursuit of Unhappiness. Maybe I sent that. Did I for it? That must have been me. Okay, hang on. All right.
Sorry. What are you guys talking about?
I'm sorry. Okay, what's your give me 1 5 or 6 digit number.
52, 33, 35.
Okay, so Ms. Paulson, you may want to go ahead and get the shareable link for this presentation and go ahead and send it out. What's your 6? 535 265.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Hey, okay. Learning curves for everybody.
That's right.
I mean, this is.
By the end of this school year, we'll have it all down, huh?
I used to do ERWC all by myself, and I'm so happy Miss Paulson is with us. And Miss Paulson, while she's familiar with Canvas, this is actually your first full position using it, correct? So she's on the learning curve, and I'm trying to make sure that the parts that are in the back of my head come to the forefront, so she knows what they are. So it can happen.
Yes.
Okay. So anyway, if you go back to the slide for source 1 and just click on Robertson's name, then it will pop up that source. So remember, this is the one that starts with the Holly Thompson, that poor young lady who got lockjaw because she yawned so much in English class. So, major claim. What do you think the major claim of that article is?
I would think it would be the sentence in paragraph
8? Okay, which one? The whole thing.
Yeah.
That is only one sentence.
Yeah.
Certainly being too prone to boredom leaves you vulnerable to all sorts of nasties, including problem gambling, drug and alcohol abuse, binge eating, dropping out of school, and depression and anxiety. So what you're saying is that every other paragraph in that is related to all the possible negative effects of boredom. The whole article. Okay. Courtney, did you have the same one or a different? You're going to agree with that one? Okay. Miss Paulson, which one did you? Huh? Oh, wait.
Sorry.
See, this is why I like it when we're in the same room. Then I can see who's really.
I know. And hold on. I have a student actually at my desk. I have to answer a question really quickly, so I'm just going to put you guys on hold.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, hold on.
Now, I think that is a good one, and I think that does give a good point. But one of the things you want to do is also look at the title, because the title always gives a clue. And I even had one of my juniors yesterday ask, what about the title? How should I title this? keep in mind that the title reflects your claim. And so it should be able to point the reader in the direction. Notice that this says, embrace boredom to become more creative. So paragraph 8 does talk about the negative effects of being bored, that you can get yourself into all kinds of other trouble. And the thing is, some of these are not related to actual online or using smartphone. I looked a little bit lower, and I actually found a couple of what I call flags. Here's one of the flags. See this? And this is important. Anytime the author tells you this is important and then says something, it's like, that's important. The other thing is, I've got a couple dashes here, and I always tell students dashes are arrows. So this is almost like it's pointing to, here's what's important. It says, and here is the possible downside of all that boredom and technology, or averting technology. Boredom has a purpose. And when you go back up to the top, you think of that. Boredom has a purpose. That's why you want to embrace it, so you can become more creative. So you want to make sure that when you choose the possible major claim, that it is reflected in the title. And the flip side of that is, when you're writing your own document, find a title that can reflect and even bring in the reader. Okay? And I don't know if Ms. Paulson, are you back with us yet?
I am back. And you know what? I did a little research for a second while you were talking about that. And the yes, the email that went out does have the wrong link to the wrong slides. I resent one to my students. So girls, if you open your email, although it looks like you're already in there, but anyway, it was the link to the 10th grade unit. So okay. Just so you know, by accident.
Okay. So, yeah, I'll double check and make sure everybody's got the correct one after we finish. Yes. Okay, so that's the main idea. Now, how does he support it? What kind of evidence is he using to support the idea that we need to embrace boredom?
Can I speak up to that too then?
Yeah. Well, as long as you're not giving answers yet, because I'm doing wait time.
Right, I know. No, I just want them maybe to focus after the main point, like paragraph 12. I think if I numbered them right, paragraph 12, like you said, soon after that, if you read carefully and read sort of with that task in mind of finding support, I think in that, for me, it printed out onto page 2, but it's like paragraphs 13 through 18. I think inside there, you'll find good kind of concrete support for his argument.
Mm-hmm. Do you find any research in this section? What did they find?
That workers given a very boring routine has to be much more creative immediately afterwards than workers who are not bored.
Okay, so there's some good support there. Would you have any questions upon reading this, or do you think that's sufficient support to kind of...
Well, what kind of boring routine did they get, and what was it creative with?
Yeah, that's what I'd like to know. There's still some missing information here. Any other kind of evidence? How does he explain what he's talking about? That we need boredom.
Boredom is a signal that you are seeking for new goals, and the risk is that you tend to easily satisfy the rest of life.
Very good. What's interesting about this, and I think this is why popular magazines may not be the best when it comes to finding information that supports your theory, but we're all relying on the fact that he is a neuropsychologist. So here's his ethos down here. And he is the T-Bone Pickens Distinguished Research Scientist. I don't know exactly what that means, but it's got to be impressive. And so
sounds fancy.
Right. And so we are counting on his expertise. And so the fact that he's a psychologist, we do trust the fact that when he says that it is a signal that you're searching for new goals. And this really did speak to me because I have my own personal experiences, especially this past summer, where I would get bored. And the last thing I wanted to do was scrub down the bathroom. I didn't want to do it. It was too hot. I just didn't feel like it. What am I going to do instead? And that's where I reached for a new book to start reading, or that might have been, hey, I need to write a letter to. In fact, Ms. Paulson, that article that got published in California English, I wrote an article that got published because I was bored.
That's so funny.
Isn't that funny? I was like, what am I going to do? I have nothing to do. And then I remember, and I don't even know where it came from. It was just all of a sudden it popped in my head. Oh yeah, I was going to write about. And so, is that funny?
It supports what he's saying.
That is.
That giving yourself boredom time, it sparks creativity. That's amazing.
Right.
What a great example.
Yep. But the inspiration for the article came because I was on social media. It was a Facebook meme that I had seen, and it inspired me to write. And I thought, I got to write about that because that's just wrong. And then I went off doing something else. But it wasn't until I got bored and thought, what? I don't want to do anything right now. What should I do? Hey, I'm going to write the article that got published.
That's so interesting. Interesting.
Anyway, okay, enough bragging. All right, so do you agree or disagree with Robertson? Do you believe that we need that time of boredom to be creative?
I would agree with it.
Why?
Because when you're bored, your mind is empty, so you think of creative things to do.
Okay. Has something happened to you that you kind of think, you know what, that actually did come because I was bored?
Yeah, no.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure.
Okay. What about you, Yvette?
To me, I feel like it's hard for me to agree or disagree because I'm never bored because I'm always so busy.
Okay.
Like after this, I have to go pick up my brother at Old River and then go to the east side to pick up my sister. Right there on Mount Vernon.
Wow.
RFC. And I have to go home and then change to go to work.
Oh my goodness.
And then
and I am just so thrilled that you're here with us because you are not a unique senior in these classes. These are pretty stressful. And I appreciate yours because you're kind of living proof that teenagers do not get addicted to technology. You would say that do you use it at all? Do you use it just in moderation, or I ain't got time for that?
I use it when I have time.
Good.
So not a lot.
Good. So you've organized that time. Okay. So it's an interesting point though to look at, and I've seen other students who just bring your eyes up just a little bit further. There's a whole world out here. Okay. So how could you use his evidence in each of the options? Which one of the three do you think this could be very useful for?
Probably option 2.
Okay, the argument essay, and in support or in refutation of what claim?
Like against technology.
Okay. And what specifically would you want to use? Which of these would you go to? Actually, the one that you picked earlier, even though it wasn't necessarily the major theme or thesis, if we use that paragraph 8, how would it support? Would it support the anti-technology, or is that even related?
Well, can I add to that too? That
Sure.
if we are thinking ahead, also knowing like how these resources that we have interact, a couple of the articles that we'll talk about in a little bit talk about exactly what's in that paragraph 8: abuse, binge eating, depression, especially depression. So I think if you were going to make a link between the sources, and if you were going to focus whether you were for or against the idea that being too technologically connected to your smartphones and computers and tablets causes youth to be depressed, you might focus in on that, and that would be a good link between the 2 or 3 other articles that bring up that topic exactly.
Right. And he's a psychologist, so his ethos is going to bring validity to your ideas. If we look at the next paragraph, though, this one, now we're looking at the boredom. Boredom means you're feeling your attention is not engaged on something either inside or outside of your head. The restlessness which comes with it signifies a search for something, but you don't know what. I really like the way he explains that. That is the definition of boredom. Honestly, how do you define boredom? Up until I like the way he said it. Now, let's talk about quotations while we're on this. How much of that do you think you should use in a direct quotation? Should you use the whole thing? What do you think is the meat of that? What is the best part of that you would want to use? Or do you think it's just better paraphrased?
Personally, I would just use a following standard of the accommodation section here inside or outside the.
Okay. And so now we need to set that up, because now we need to give credit to Robertson. So if this is the first time, and we're going to look at this a little bit later, but remember that you need to put in what's called the lead-in information. And so psychology, or psychologist Ian Robertson, in the Psychology Today article, title, date, states that, quote it. You still will want to have kind of an explanation after that. You still need what's considered the analysis. So why do we need to know what the definition is according to him? How does this connect with the message we want to give?
If you're bored and you are more creative when you're bored, then your creative mind will do something that is not on technology.
Right. You're explaining that your mind needs to do something else. That's the significance, so that's the analysis of it. So anytime you use a quote, you don't want it to just sit there. It's what I've heard people call quote bombing. And that's where you just drop in a quote, because here's my support, but you don't say, here's my support. You actually need to kind of stretch this out. You need to make the connection for your reader.
Mm-hmm.
We also talked about this Dorothy Parker quote earlier. What do you do if we wanted to use her quote, "The cure for boredom is curiosity," how do we cite that in the essay? Because, first of all, who found it?
Dorothy Parker in the article, and they explained to someone who was then in the
Yeah, I would even think we get Robertson's name up further. We would probably start with Robertson because he is the primary source of he's the one who said it. So Ian Parker cites, or Ian Parker. Now I just married them. Ian Robertson quotes Dorothy Parker in his article, comic quote, blah, blah, blah. Now, it's a nice quote. The cure for boredom is curiosity. And there's really no way to paraphrase it. Is it something that you still want to use?
Can I interject there a little bit too while they're thinking about it?
Yeah.
So I would suggest that because it's like a quote within the article, you're going to be tempted to use it in your own paper because you're going to go, yeah, that's perfect. But it's going to create sort of a problem of how do you cite a source from one of your sources, so it can create a little bit of a problem with the quotation marks. And no matter what you pull out of this article, Embrace Boredom to Become More Creative, you have to give credit to Dr. Robertson. Mm-hmm. He's the only one that you would cite. So if you're going to use Dorothy Parker's words, it's best to say something like Robertson cites Dorothy Parker as saying blah, blah, blah. And it's hard to put that into your own words. Mrs. Mm-hmm. Campbell and I talked about that earlier. The cure for boredom is curiosity. So you may just either want to avoid it altogether, or you could say something even that Robertson supports his idea with a famous quote that the cure for boredom is curiosity, end quotation mark. Just be mindful of that circular nature of quotes within quotes or something. So either find a different way to say it, or you could really avoid that altogether and just use other sources, other quotes from the article rather than that one.
Because do either of you know who Dorothy Parker is? Chances are your peers won't either. Dorothy Parker's
I've never heard of her.
She's a short story author.
Okay.
Now, why is Dr. Robertson quoting a short story author? I don't know. Sometimes these decisions are made. I'm sure that as reading in psychology today, there's probably quite a few people who might be familiar with Dorothy Parker's work. But if you don't know who she is, don't use it. Okay.
Right.
All right. So we got a lot of sources to get through, so I'm going to kind of speed this up a little bit more. Let's switch now to Pirsig Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. And Ms. Paulson, you want to talk about what this source is because you have more information on it than I do.
Right. Okay, so this is a book. So this is an excerpt from a book. That means it's a few pages that were taken out of it. I don't remember exactly when it was written, but it was written quite a while ago. And it's about, just like it says, it's about maintaining motorcycles by yourself, doing it by hand. But he uses that whole metaphor of like mechanically working on something with your own hands, and he kind of extends it to life. Like that's where the Zen part comes in, is how do you sort of connect this idea of doing things slower, maybe more hands-on and more focused, like maintaining your own motorcycle, to how do you live your life. So if you most of this excerpt that we're reading kind of has to do with nature. I mean, it also has to do with motorcycle riding and taking the slow roads or the backcountry roads versus the interstate highways that might get you there quicker, but you're missing so much if you're on the main road that you would see if you're on a back road. So that's kind of where it comes from. This is a very popular book, especially among guys, men. I know it is a book that a lot of men like to read, because he talks obviously about himself and his experience with his son. So that's where it's a lot of like metaphor. So you have to read it and think like, okay, he's talking about noticing things on his motorcycle, like the smells and the sounds and the sights that he sees that you wouldn't experience in a car. But he's really talking about a way to get through life. So it's kind of an extended metaphor.
Right. And so the question becomes, how does this excerpt fit in with the idea of boredom brilliance? Can you find kind of, I'm not sure if you're going to be able to find an explicit claim here. If you do.
Yeah, in fact, now that I think about it, now that you're saying that, Mrs. Campbell, I don't think he talks much at all about actual technology, does he? He doesn't say anything about smartphones or computers. He's talking a little bit broader of just like how people, it's kind of more philosophical. So it does require you to stretch a little bit more to be making connections between this and the greater argument of, what do you think kids ought to be doing with the technology that's in their hands?
Right. And certainly creativity is definitely addressed, although the word never appears.
True.
So how does this connect to any one of the prompts that you have? I think if you were to get it, and I almost think that this is an epideictic speech in and of itself, even though it's a writing, but it's certainly mourning this kind of natural curiosity, especially when he's seeing in his 11-year-old son that, yeah, I've seen it. There's no thrill whatsoever of this new kind of curiosity. If you look down at paragraph 18, where he talks about the Chautauqua, and this is a Native American tribe, the Tencho Chautauquas that used to move across America. This America, the one that we are now in, an old-time series of popular talks intended to edify and entertain, improve the mind, and bring culture and enlightenment to the ears and thoughts of the hearer. The Chautauquas were pushed aside by faster-paced radio, movies, and TV, and it seems to me the change was not entirely an improvement. Perhaps because of these changes, the stream of national consciousness moves faster now and is broader, but it seems to run less deep. What does that mean?
That's step one in trying to figure out anything you're reading, by the way, girls. It's very simple. You just need to figure out, what is he talking about? Like, don't be shy about starting at the very beginning of, like, just trying to put into your own words, what is he talking about?
We're still reading. It's a very rich, long paragraph. So.
Take some time to get through this.
Right. Has something popped into your mind? An image that You don't know where that image just came from as you were reading this. Okay, if you talk into your shirt, we're not going to be able to hear you. Animal? Okay. All right. Make the connection from there. Why did you think of an animal? Maybe if I explain my story, it might help. Because this actually, I was putting this module together shortly after I took a trip. My husband and I had to drive to Denver, and that's a 16-hour drive. So it was going to be long, and we did split it in half. But I have never been further than, well, went to Canada when I was 5 years old, so I barely remember it. I went to TJ in 94 while I was in San Diego just for a cultural experience, and boy, was it a cultural experience. From that, but other than that, I have not traveled outside the state. So this was the first time I was seeing Arizona. Utah especially, you have to drive all the way through Utah to get to Colorado. And Colorado, gorgeous. And so, had my phone plugged in, sure enough, and I've got games on my phone, I've got books on my phone and everything. But to watch, just looking out, and I did share some of that in the lesson that you saw right at the beginning of this one. The beautiful mountain formations and nature and animals. I make the connection with animals too, especially ones that you hardly ever see. The hawks that are out there. If you are in this electronic world, you're going to miss that one. That's what I thought. Have you guys been in a place where just the beauty of it struck you as like, wow? Where have you been?
Missouri.
Oh, yeah? What was your favorite part about Missouri?
There's a lot of green there.
Uh-huh.
And there's like a lot of places, the water there is really beautiful. And when we're driving there, we passed New Mexico. And you can see all the stars at night. That was really...
Have you seen did you see the Milky Way?
No.
Because when it gets that dark and you can see the Milky Way, you know you are nowhere near technology, I can tell you that. But yeah, sounds really nice. Courtney, have you been in a place of...
Yeah, Hawaii.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Oh, I want to go to Hawaii. You've probably been to Hawaii too, Miss Paulson, haven't you?
I sure have. My sister lives there, so I'm lucky enough to get to go as often as I can get out there. She lives on Maui.
So which island did you go to?
I've been to all of them, but I just went to Maui on spring break.
And
it's so green. My favorite is Hawaii. It's the most green because of all the rain. I just love it there, and it's like a breath of fresh air.
Lovely. And I'll bet you didn't worry too much about social media while you were there. See, that's what I think the connection is. And so that's why when you are doing this, the narrative, I think, is a much underrated method of writing. I find, especially in argument papers, that I'm less impressed with statistics and facts than I am about personal experience. There's something about the personal experience, especially if it's well described, that gets the reader in the situation with you. That's where this is really powerful. That's why this piece is really powerful. He does a great job of describing so many things, and then he leaves us with this kind of philosophical question at the end. Now the stream of our common consciousness seems to be obliterating its own banks, losing its central direction and purpose, flooding the lowlands, disconnecting and isolating the highlands, and to no particular purpose other than the wasteful fulfillment of its own internal momentum. Some channel deepening that refers to the farrowing that he did earlier seems called for. This necessity to just clear out your mind. Okay. Does that help a little bit with this? Or is it?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So how would you use any of this in evidence for any of the options? Okay, and that would be the Epideictic Speech. And how would you use it then? Because I agree, I think this is kind of like its own speech.
Maybe it's more like a personal experience.
Right. And I think with this one, because it's a very extended personal experience, you would just be summarizing. So you could just refer to it. In Robert Pirsig, in his excerpt, Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, describes the beauty of traveling through the country with his son and realizing that his son has no curiosity or appreciation of it. That summarizes the whole thing, and then you can use that as part of, it's not just me who's experienced this. Look at this person too. Anything you wanted to add on this one, Ms. Wilson?
No, I don't think so, other than that it might help to read this one more than once as you read the other articles, and keep thinking about your own experiences. Like Mrs. Campbell said, this reminded me of my own trips out and about with my family, where I was in nature and trying to pay attention to real life, and thinking about the effect of my attention, like where was my attention and where was my mind at when I was on a trip like this. So that's all I would just say. It might seem like it doesn't fit, but the more that you read through the other few sources too, kind of keep circling back around and think, like, what are the themes that are kind of the same? What are all of these authors sort of, what kind of themes are overlapping between them? Maybe they agree with each other sometimes or disagree with each other, but that will help you write a good paper synthesizing the sources, because you'll be seeing where they connect, where they're the same, and maybe where they differ, where they're different.
And if anything, it's just a model text. If you are going for the speech, you could use that as a model text to kind of look at the formatting. That's okay right now. That's not plagiarism. At least in terms of, if you're using it as an inspiration, it's your own story. But, well, how should I set this up? And then you look at, well, how did Pirsig set his up? Okay, caps. Moving on to caps now. How smartphones have unleashed humanity's creative potential. So what we have here is basically known as the what? Technology's good. That's the counter-argument. We have a counter-argument here for people who think actually smartphones help us. What is the primary argument here? What benefits do the smartphones have according to CAP? Okay, there's a good quote there. And they belong to us to an extent that no previous device ever achieved. Because of that, we belong to them too, and it's a bond that shapes us at the deepest level in how we express ourselves, in what we hold out as beautiful and compelling, in how we try to emotionally connect in ways abstract and literal with our friends and muses. Our phones are now indelibly bound up with our aesthetic souls, and today both are always on. Do you agree or disagree with him, or a little bit of both? Personally, I think he over-dramatized a little bit, but I think what this reminds me of is I did read the Steve Jobs biography by Walter Isaacson. And I know that he was the creator of Apple. He was the one who brought us the first Macintosh computer, which apparently now makes a very good fish tank. But the whole purpose and the whole drive of Apple computers has always been the creative part of us. And so everything from the time it started was meant to make us more creative. Steve Jobs was the first one to come up with the fonts. He was very interested in calligraphy and how the different letterings worked. And so once that PC came out, his was the first one to come up with so many of the choices of fonts. So this is what that reminds us of, that it does give us another tool that we can extend our creativity.
Well, and I was going to say, when I was reading all of the responses of the last the challenge days, and one of them was about when was the last time you had a good idea, and many of the students replied that it was something that they saw on Pinterest or Facebook, or something on social media that gave them a good idea, and they went out and did something. And that would sort of support this argument that this interconnectedness, like you can see what some teenager in North Dakota is doing with makeup and watch it and think, oh my gosh, that's such a good idea. And then you can do the same and build on it, at home. And that's new. We've never been able to do that before. And so that's an argument for him that supports this idea.
I have a great niece who is she's a sophomore now in high school. Every time I go there, she's shown me another young person who has his own YouTube channel and is doing all kinds of things. There's one that plays games with a friend. There's one that tries out the latest whatever. And I'm amazed that there's a lot of famous young people out there because of YouTube.
Yep. It's a job for some of them. I listened to some gals on they have a podcast called What We Said, and they're two girls who are in their early 20s, and they just talk about stuff on their podcast, and then they have Instagram and YouTube accounts, and they that is their job. They make money at it. That's what they do. It's amazing. It's like a different kind of business than I've ever been used to.
I'm hooked on, I've got two that I subscribe to. One is a guy who removes bald-faced hornet nests and yellow jacket nests in Pennsylvania. Apparently there's a big problem with them up there. And you know what he's done? He has transplanted 2 bald-faced hornet's nests he has a sizable backyard. He has kind of like a little farm. And he put the 2 nests together, and it's this huge nest, and he just films them all day. They are fascinating to watch. They really are. I swear. And then the other one, there's these Australian guys in their 20s, and they're obsessed with gravity. And so they've gone all over the place, but mostly they stay at this it's a 44-meter tower. And so they're known as the 44 Club. And they drop the weirdest stuff off this tower. Have you seen them? They'll also go to the soccer stadium, and they'll try and throw a basket into a basketball hoop that's way down in the center. Love those guys. They're funny.
That is so funny.
Yeah.
It's so funny. So random.
Right. And that is a whole lot more entertaining than anything I could find on television. Absolutely. Yes. So,
yes. Yeah. And don't you feel like you kind of know them? Because the medium, like a podcast or a YouTube video, it's a little more personal than like something that's on TV. I feel more connected to those things.
In fact, one of them was expecting his second child in the past couple of weeks, and I'm waiting. She had the baby yet. She had the baby yet. So it's a lot of fun. So yeah, this is a good one to kind of look at for the counter argument, and he's got some good information on why we now have an extension of our creative minds. So, okay. Next one is hide. So this is actually where the argument essay prompt comes from. Now we're going in the other direction. So this was the article about smartphones and the possible link to the number of suicidal thoughts, attempts of suicide, that sort of thing. So looking at this, how do you think this article will be helpful to you in any of the three options? Good. In fact, I would think that if you were to just focus on making the infographic of this article, I think that would be pretty powerful. Make sure that you give proper, and we'll show you how to do that, but what you're going to do is put a little citation on the infographic so that people know that this is where the information came from. We do have some personal anecdotes. So again, this is, when you're looking at this basically is an argument. Look at how the title is phrased. We need to talk about kids and smartphones. So obviously we have our audience established. Who's the author talking to? Parents. He has a message. And what would you say, what would be his call to action for those parents? What does he expect parents to do with the information after having read this? Monitor that. Yeah, it may not be, in fact, is this the one where it says you don't necessarily have to take it away, but certainly you should be monitoring how much time they're actually on it? Is that the right one, Ms. Paulson? Is this the one that does the...
I'm not sure.
I think it was Twinge. Yeah.
Yeah, and it talks about different levels of using your device and its correlation to suicide and depression rates.
Right.
Yeah. It references Twinge.
Right. So we have actually given you the other source as well. So this is how the Time Magazine author would use the scientific study to create this. But really, this is an argument essay. And again, if you're looking at this for formatting on how to create a good argument, I think this is very successful. We've got a nice mixture of narrative about Langston, and then this, now he's transitioning into the actual research behind this. So I think this is a really effective, do I have to make it that long? No. But just seeing how he has set up the information, how he's hooked in the readers, how he's presented the problem, how he has presented the research behind all of this. And then when we get down to the bottom, notice how he wraps up from Nina's story with the suicide attempt. So, smartphone experiment at San Lorenzo doesn't meet the standards of the scientific method. but it's one more piece of evidence linking mobile devices with the troubles today's teens are facing. While there are no doubt helpful and healthy ways young people could use smartphones to enrich their lives, it's becoming harder to argue that the status quo, near ubiquitous teen smartphone ownership, coupled with more or less unfettered internet access, is doing kids good. So it's not a direct call saying, parents, stop! But he does give some advice here and there of how some parents have dealt with the problem. Any more you want to see on the Hyde piece, Ms. Paulson?
I don't think so, other than just do your best to read it carefully and annotate it, mark on it as much as you can, and make sure that you do your best to find their main claim. What kind of support does this author use? This one, like Mrs. Campbell said, there's a lot of statistics and facts, which could be very helpful to you. Decide whether you agree or disagree with it after you've read it, and then how could you possibly use all the evidence in here to support your or argue with your opinion.
Okay, let's move to Nunez. This was the National Geographic piece, I believe. Yep. 6 ways to spark your creativity. What's the purpose of this document?
Support boredom, like things to do when you're bored to increase your creativity.
Excellent. That's its purpose, and that's what it's going to do. Now, how do you think you might use this in any of the options? Which one of the options do you think you would be most likely to go to this one? Okay, so the argument essay. So supporting what thesis?
I think it to support against
Okay, so there are other things when you're bored. These are better things to go to than the phone. Perfect. Okay. Anything else we can use these for? Ms. Paulson, did you want to add what you had said earlier about this particular piece?
Sure, just a notice that, so there are different types of writing assignments, right? Like you can write an argumentative essay, you can write a story, we call that narrative. This essay, or this, it's an essay, but it's an example of something called the process analysis essay, and it's easy to tell partly because it's numbered, but it's like a how-to article. And so that's a type of writing you might be asked to do in some of your classes sometimes, like how to, depending on what your major is, maybe you're going to be asked, how to perform a procedure or how to set something up. So this one is just telling you how to do, how to spark your creativity. So it's just an example of that type of essay, and you could use it in your paper. Either way, I was looking over some of these. Some of them even mention technology a little bit as not a negative thing. So just because it lists like doing nothing or going outside or looking around at what you can tweak, number 3 actually really does list technology as a way to look around to see what other people are doing, which is a benefit. So as you read it over, you can just make little notes about each one, and you could use this no matter which option you choose.
Right.
Yeah, it's a useful one.
Yeah, and especially I like that you brought that up, because sometimes students feel that if they're going to use a particular source that they have to use everything in it. No, you don't. You can take, don't take it out of its natural context, but like this is one way that technology is used to promote creativity. So, okay, number 6. More than halfway there. Stevenson. Back to let's see. This is the TED Talk, correct?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. And I did not have time to see if I could find them. Don't you hate ads? Especially this one of two business. Okay. All right.
So I've been studying creativity for my whole career. First as a journalist, interviewing.
Okay. What I tried to do earlier was to go to the TED website and...
So I've been studying creativity for my whole career.
If you want the transcripts, if you can get to TED's, the original site, they provide the transcripts. Problem is I looked earlier and the search wasn't coming up. So, but anytime we present one of these TED Talks, if you want to go to that, to actually read along, and that helps to print it out when you are citing it, usually the TED site is very helpful to that. So from watching this, you remember some of the things that he suggested of what sparks creativity? You don't remember? Okay, then that's your clue. So we've got the title, What Sparks Creativity. We know from the title what it would be helpful for us. Which of the three can it help us with? Either one or two. So if you are doing the speech, what would be the topic of that speech if you're using this as a source? Right. So if we were doing the speech, it might be extolling the virtues of creativity. And then you can use this as a source. I was also thinking too, remember how we said that the infographic for that Time Magazine article would be very effective? There are people who I think could listen to this, be inspired to create an infographic based on that as well. The brain works in a whole lot of different ways, and it's often stronger in some people in some areas. And so it's just another direction you might want to go in. Can you translate a TED Talk into an infographic?
That's a good idea.
Yeah, it'd be fun to experiment with. So if that's the direction you want to go, make sure that you do listen to it carefully, keeping your focus in the forefront there. And do see if you can, I haven't had the time today to really go and do it, but see if you can find the transcript for this off of TED, and that can kind of help you as well. Okay.
I just searched again too real quickly, and I wonder if it's just not, if maybe we're spelling his name wrong or something, but I didn't find it.
Stevenson, how can you misspell Stevenson?
I know. I'm just saying, I searched for it again and I don't find it, so I don't know.
You didn't find it either? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not going to, I think a lot of it has to do with, you notice how it's got some other, what's that? After TED, it's because there's so many branches of TED. Oh no, more commercial.
Wow, we sure have a lot of.
Okay, Zumbro River. I wonder if we looked up Zumbro River, if that wouldn't help. But if TED doesn't have it actually on their website, then it's not going to have the transcript either. So,
right.
But hey, you got 8 sources here, 9 sources, 8 or 9.
Oh, I found it. You know why I found it? It's TEDx Talks, which is different. So you're right. You called it. It's those extra letters after it.
Okay.
So I found it.
Okay. So is the transcript available for it?
Let me take a peek.
If it is, could you, because you do have editing on that, if you could maybe link, instead of the YouTube, if we can link the TED Talk to that, I think that will be more helpful to students so that they can find the transcript.
Yeah, I don't see it. It just has a little thing about with the video. I don't see a transcript. Maybe that's a difference.
Okay, that's probably it. Because they do say that it's just an affiliate. And so it's kind of like why the Jack in the Box on California doesn't have a club like all the other Jack in the Box stuff. See how my brain works?
I see. I get it.
Okay. All right, so source 7, twinge. So this was the one that was referenced by Hyde in Time Magazine, but this is coming from The Atlantic. Here is another one of these that starts with a narrative, and then, so it's telling the story, and then it asks the question, what happened in 2012 to cause such dramatic shifts in behavior? And now he's getting into the actual problem that this, and we call this the occasion, which is the event that kind of sparks or inspires a person to write or to research. And so this also helps set up what we call the rhetorical situation. So you've seen that term, rhetorical situation. And what that means is all of the circumstances surrounding somebody to find a problem that needs solving. So that's what this, and that's why the narrative is so important. I think it sets up that rhetorical situation in ways nothing else can. So here you've got some more research here. This is a little bit more historical in nature, more fact-based. I think it is important for because you guys, technically, are they, Miss Paulson, are they still in the millennials? Are we still in the millennials for this generation?
I would say millennials for...
You're in the swimming pool again. Put your microphone back.
I know, set it down.
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
Some people are calling them Generation None, like None, because they don't affiliate with anything. But I still think of, these kids, I think, are the
millennials.
I call them millennials,
Yeah. And millennial comes from the fact that they were born around the year 2000. And as they're coming into adulthood, and here they're establishing themselves as the individuals that they are. So it is kind of important to know, as a millennial, Miss Paulson and I did not have cell phones when we were in college.
No. We didn't have computers back then.
Now, I'll admit, I had, when I was in high school, West High at the time was the first one to have its own computer lab, made up of about 18 Commodore 64s. And if you don't know what a Commodore 64 is, Google it. You'll have a great time. That's when you had to have 2 discs. You had to have one disc to boot up the computer, and then you had to take that one out, and then you had to put in the other one that actually was the driver of the software you were using, which was primarily Microsoft Word. That was it. That, and you got to play. Well, then later on, you got to have the Minecraft was originally a free game that came on Windows 95 computers. That and Solitaire. So it was so different for us. We actually had to go into a library to physically go to the card catalog and then physically go look for our research. Ivette's looking at me like I'm crazy.
I know. They have no idea.
They have no idea. No idea. And I think it's
without YouTube. How did we do it, Mrs. Campbell?
Again, this is how I've seen so much happen, and there's still so much more to happen, and it's happening faster and faster. So this is really an important article to kind of get an understanding of what life was like before, and even for the adults now who are, raising the millennials, we need to understand how this is impacting you guys. So, okay. And that's the benefit for twinge. So, okay, formatting. Now, as I explained earlier today, were you guys raised on the 5-paragraph essay? Yeah. That was actually introduced by a woman named Jane Schaefer. You remember, you've heard her name? Okay. She was an interesting woman. She's dead now. And I'm hoping that we can kind of vary the 5-paragraph essay. Now, I'm not saying that the 5-paragraph essay didn't have its benefits. She actually came up with this system because she was getting bad grades in writing. She did not know how to write. So she talked with somebody, and this is the structure that they came up with. So the 5-paragraph essay was designed to help students who can't write at all. Do you remember when you first thought what grade you were in? Freshman year? Okay. I'm hoping that they'll just, it should be 6th grade.
Yeah, I was in 6th or 7th.
Okay. I want you to try and detox from it. I want you to get away from it. I want you to speak in your voice. If you look at every one of these sources we've given you, not one of them fits the 5-paragraph structure. Not one of them. Good. But we do expect an introduction that it can be 1 or 2 paragraphs. Robertson, if Robertson turned in that essay to me, I would have told him, is there any way you can cut down that hook? It's too long. His thesis doesn't show up until paragraph 12. I think it's too much in that first part. And that's why everybody seemed to focus on the fact that they thought that because the girl was bored, she should, if she wasn't bored, she wouldn't have wound up in the hospital, so she should have been allowed on her phone. And that's not what Robertson's trying to say. He does say, like in paragraph 13, now we're not saying that this is what the problem is, so don't make it that long. You do want a hook, though, to bring in that reader. The title helps with that. So you don't need a big, long one if you've got a good title. It also provides the background information the audience may need. Remember that your audience has not read all of these. You need to go, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to post this in, what's the number we're posting this in, Ms. Paulson?
Let me look really quick. I think it was...
we'll send out email or inbox messages letting you know where it's posted so that you can just fast forward and listen to the end of it. Thank you so much for coming, Yvette.
You're welcome.
Okay.
It might be 1.3.2.
Okay, 1.3.2. Well, we'll just make sure everybody knows where to find it. Okay.
You know what, too? I hate to.
And you need to leave, too?
I'm
so
sorry.
No, that's fine. That's fine. That'll get us through quickly. And do you need to go too, Courtney? Okay. I'm just, all this is telling you now how to do it. And I think that if you go through and see what the models are in these, and I'll just go ahead and finish up the recording, get it posted. So whenever you have to leave, that's okay. I have given some possible suggestions, but by no means do you have to follow them. And so we do have for you the just suggestions of what paragraphing you would need. This is for options 1 and 2. Now for option 3, I have 2 links in this presentation. The first one gives you information on what to remember when you're actually creating an infographic. So if this is the one that you want to do, please watch this video first to give you some good hints on how to put it together. And then I've linked, this is actually a course resource that you can also find here in the class resources. But this is how to build infographics. And within this, I've given you 3 different online free services. They may want you to log in with an account. You can always use the Kern High School District as a Google account. So if it says log in with Google, do that. Just use your 6-digit at Kern High. And then these all provide for you the links to where you can actually find these apps online to help you create them. Do not pay for anything. There are too many free ones out there. You do not need to pay for any of them. Okay. We will want you to have a works cited page because you're going to put together several resources. We do not expect you to use all 7 at the same time. For one thing, they all serve different purposes. But you should use at least 3. So for options 1 and 2, you have a works cited page. For that option 3, you're going to put the citations at the bottom of the infographic. I have also linked for you how to do the formatting in MLA. This is another course resource. You have, of course, the OWL Purdue, which is the online writing lab. This is the best part, though. Google provides a template already done in MLA. You can do this one of 2 ways. You can either click here. Now, the only problem with this particular one is that it does not have the citation, the works cited at the bottom. But as soon as it pops up, come on, pop up. And slow down now. Oh, it was 3, 4. There it is. Okay. So you just need to fill this in. You're putting in your last name. This is already in the header. So all you have to do is change it here. And then the part down in the regular document, you just have to change this to ERWC. You'll change this to Ms. Paulson because you have her. And then notice how the MLA date is. You put your title. It is already double-spaced, or at least it should already be double-spaced. For the works cited, you can also go to, if you get a new document, it may not work this way. Nope, don't worry. You actually have to go to the Google Doc. So if you put in Google Doc, this is where you find the templates. Go to Google Docs. And then it provides for you the different templates. Look for the one that says Report, MLA, boom. You open it up. The only thing this doesn't have is the heading up. Oh, I guess it does. Okay, never mind. And it does have at the bottom, you scroll down, just right, so slow. There it is. So you have the works cited already set up for you. In addition to having that, on that same resource page, you also have a video that shows you exactly how you need to do MLA formatting and in-text citation. You need both of them because they work together as a team. So make sure that you also watch this video. If you still need a little help, not sure how to organize that essay, I have put in, this is just a basic video of how I look for certain things and how I grade according to the rubric. So those are there for you as a resource as well. Okay. Finally. Okay, that's that we are actually all went over. I have given you a sample. The in-text citation requires, for the first time you use a source, a lead-in. So we have the type, the ethos basically of the person. The person who wrote this article was just a reporter. Robertson was a psychologist. Markham is the writer for Time Magazine. So you're putting in what that person, where that person's coming from, what he does or she does. The title italicized. The full name of the author. The genre of what it is for Persig, it would be his book Excerpt. For I think most of them would be articles, online articles. Yeah. Then we have the title of the article. Notice the capitalization. Everything gets capitalized except for prepositions and articles. And that is in quotation marks. After that, you have the date of publication, and this is the MLA format. You have the day first, space, full name of the month typed out, and then the year. There's no commas in there at all. And then in parentheses. And then you have the quote. The next time that you use the same source, you only need the last name, and this is the paragraph number because we don't have pages. Okay. Notice also that it's the end of the quote, parenthesis, last name, space, paragraph number, end parenthesis, period. You do have a little sample there of what it looks like for 1 and 2. For number 3, you'll want to download the PDF. So whatever you create, it's going to give you the option to download the PDF. That's the one that you want to post. Whichever one you choose is due September 9th. That's Monday at 11:59 p.m. That's at night. Some people get that a little mixed up. Whoops, sorry. If you do not submit the document by that time, it will be considered late and receive a 15% deduction. Now, this is actually a little fuzzier because I have set Canvas to assign the peer reviews the next morning, so that's Tuesday at 5 a.m. Those of you who are night owls have about 4 hours in the middle of the night that you could still submit it. As long as you have it's there for peer review assignment, you're fine. If you don't do the peer review, you're going to have to do your own. You lose points there as well. Okay. Here's how you find it. And this is why I'm recording this, because it'll be a little tricky to find. You wake up Tuesday morning. You've already turned in your document. You're going to go back to the assignment where you actually turned in the document. So that will be 1.5. I'm sorry. Here it is, 1.4.4. So you're going to go back to 1.4.4 where you originally submitted the document. And you know how you get in the corner, so you've submitted it and you get a little box pops up that says success. Green check mark, you've turned it in. It's located approximately here. At the bottom of that, after 5 o'clock on the 10th, you'll have a name that is hyperlinked. When you click the hyperlink, it takes you to the other student's document. It will look a little like this. It's not quite the same, but you're going to see the document here, and you're going to have, you'll probably see the rubric, but you're also going to have these boxes here. The instructions on the peer review are tricky as well. Here's why. You guys are entering into a conversation. You actually want somebody to listen to your paper, or you want to be able to hear it. And so what you're going to do is use the rich content editor to read the essay aloud. So when you go back to the document, there's this little speaker here that says speech recognition. You're going to click on that. And as soon as you click on that, you're going to move this aside, and you're actually going to read the essay aloud. And then after you've did, the whole purpose of that is so that you can, oh, that's not what we want to do. I'm sorry. Don't press that button. Press this button. But you don't have to show yourself. You don't have to use the camera. This is actually the better one. I'm getting a little tired now, a little punchy. It's been a long, complicated day. and coming to work on the other side of town with lightning and thunder, turn the webcam off. Turn the webcam off. No video. And then you can just start recording. And you hit the button and you read aloud. So you're going to have to kind of put it to the side here so that you can read aloud. And then once you're finished, it's going to save it and it will attach it to this person's comments so they can actually hear you say it. The next thing you want to do is open up a new Google Doc. And you have some questions in 1.5.1. Just copy and paste them into the Google Doc. This is just running so slow. Title it 1.5.1 and then the last name of the person whose thing you're using or you're editing there. So I would just use Paulson. 1.5.1. Copy the questions in the text here. And then once you're finished answering them, click the blue share button, get the shareable link. It's already copied to the clipboard. Go back to 1.5.1 in the speed grader, which I accidentally closed. And then you're going to paste that in the same box that's underneath where you just put that recording. Okay, so you're going to put it like that. Okay? I know that you'll have questions. I know that was a lot of information. That's why you're having the recording so that you can go back and reference it. If you run into any trouble at all, make sure that you contact either Miss Paulson or myself. You have our contact information, and so you can find that. The peer review is due at September 9th at 11:59. And no, that's not right. That should be the 10th. Because you have the whole day to do it. And so you may want to remind Miss Paulson to have her look at, tell her that the date of when the peer review is due is wrong. We're going to change it to the 10th because you're actually getting them in the morning, so you have until midnight that day to actually do the peer review. Now, for revisions, the revision can be turned in at any time without any fear of being deducted for lateness. But you must revise something based off of the comments. I want to show you real quickly what the peer review or the revision rubric looks like, because it includes most or all of the recommended revisions from the teacher and peer review. If your document was so perfect the first time through and we couldn't find anything that could make it stronger, you could submit the same draft, but you'd only get 23 out of 25 points. Why? Because there's never any such thing as a final draft. There's always something that can be improved. It's just, we may say, oh, that was lovely, that was wonderful, but it shouldn't be satisfactory to you. You should always want to do that revision. If there are only some, like if you only address, one out of the three things, you'll get 19 out of 25. Look at this one. If you have not changed anything or you only fixing the minor punctuation, spelling errors, you're only going to get 2.5 out of that, which means if you get this, it's going to lower your first draft grade too. Once you have this done, you will resubmit back in 1.4.4. It gets regraded to the rubric. You get a higher score there. That's how you keep improving the scores in here. Okay? All right. Do you have any questions, Courtney? No. Okay. Thank you so much for your patience. I know this was kind of a long one, but I appreciate your attendance. Thank you so much, and good luck to the rest of you.